What's up, y'all? It's that Sports Kid here with my 2023 Utah Ute season predictions. Let's get into it. Last year, Utah went 10-4 and made it to the Rose Bowl. They didn't win the Rose Bowl, but they did win the Pac-12 championship, beating USC. This season, odds makers are thinking that Utah is going to take a bit of a drop off. Win total over/under is at 8.5 right now. I think that's a little bit low, but I'll talk more about that later. A lot of players return to this team, 7 starters on offense, and 9 starters on defense. And 3 Utes were drafted in this past NFL draft. The recruiting for Utah was quite good. Brought in a top 25 overall class. Of that class, there were 8 4-stars and 14 3-stars. Some of those players happen to be Spencer Fano, a offensive tackle from Provo and the #1 player from Utah, also a top 50 player nationally. They also brought in CJ Blocker from New Caney, Texas. He plays cornerback and is a top 150 player nationally. And then Dolan Bentley is not one of their top players they brought in, but I wanted to highlight him because he is a top 10 JUCO player transferring in. He's going to go into I believe it's his sophomore year. And I think he's threatening to be a starting tight end. Don't quote me on that. I might be wrong. He was also the #1 tight end from JUCO and the #1 JUCO player, #1 JUCO tight end. That's wrong. #1 JUCO player from Utah. Great. Glad we got that. Transfer portal was also pretty big for Utah. There were 3 4-stars and 4 3-stars, including Miles Battle, Logan Fano, and Lavani Dumani. That's a fun rhyming name. Playing cornerback, edge, and linebacker, respectively. Transferring in from Ole Miss, BYU. Ooh, that's a big get. Logan Fano from BYU. And then also player from Stanford playing linebacker. I don't think any of those guys are going to start. I looked at a depth chart or something. I didn't see any of their names on starting positions. If they're not going to start, they will definitely be good depth. My personal ratings for this Utah Utes team, that is how I rate the offense and defense, how good or bad either side of the ball is going to be, or at least they're projected to be this season. Pretty high on both sides of the ball. 8 for offense. You obviously have Cam Rising, who is definitely maybe not definitely, but I know some people think that he is a Heisman contender going into his 5th year, I think. But he's also coming off of an ACL tear, so I don't know. Receivers are lacking a little bit. The offensive line is really good. So is the running back room. So overall, 8 out of 10 on offense. Pretty good. Defense definitely could be the best defense in the conference, and that is so important in this conference full of offense. 8.5 is what I'm giving them on defense. The D-line should be good. Same with linebackers. Defensive backs, I think those were pretty good. Yeah, overall, super solid on both sides of the ball. So much talent, and they have a lot of experience. Back-to-back Pac-12 champs. Here is a schedule. I'm giving them a B+ schedule difficulty. They play their top games, you could say, are Florida and Baylor. Those are 2 big out-of-conference games for them. Last year they played Florida in the swamp and just narrowly lost. And then I think it's a home and home between Utah and Baylor this year. They play in Waco. Fantastic. Very strong out-of-conference schedule. Then they also play at Oregon State, at USC, Oregon, and at Washington. In all of those are conference games, and all of those teams could definitely make the Pac-12 championship game. Most of these Pac-12 teams are really good. At least their offenses are. They could definitely threaten to be in the Pac-12 championship game. Obviously, there are favorites, but it's really open. Anyone could make it, pretty much. We'll start out here talking about Florida. So last year, this game was being played in the Swamp, and the Gators narrowly won that in a Week 1 upset sort of fashion. This year, I don't think Florida is going to be as good as they were. Well, they might be as good as they were last year, but I don't think that's going to be any good. I'm not sure if Florida's going to go to a bowl game this year. I don't think they will. I am going to say it'll be a close win for Utah. Last year, obviously, being played in Gainesville gives Florida a huge advantage, and without that advantage, I think Utah probably would have won. Now that Utah does have that advantage, and their team is probably stronger, only a couple players left, I think. There were 16 returning starters. I definitely think that Utah can do it this year, having that home advantage and having more experience. Next is Baylor. Baylor had a sucky year last year. That's fine. I couldn't care less for Baylor. They could be better in the Big 12 this year, but Utah is really strong. And Baylor, I don't think, is on the road, though. Should keep it a little bit closer for whatever advantage Baylor has. I will say it'll be a close win like the Florida game, but I wouldn't be shocked if Utah went into Week 3 with a 1-1 record. But on paper, they should get wins in those two games. Next is Weber. I want to say it's Weber, but it might be Weber. I think it's Weber State. They are a FCS team from the state of Utah who I think they're pretty decent, but definitely no match for Power 5, back-to-back Pac-12 champions, Utah Utes. So, big win right there. Now we get into conference play. UCLA. I think UCLA might be slept on a little bit. They could be pretty good. They did lose a lot of pretty good players. But I still think UCLA could be pretty decent, at least in this conference. 8-4, or maybe 9 wins for the Bruins. Now, will one of those 9 wins come against the Utes? I don't think so. Utah, at least on paper, should get a win against UCLA. I believe UCLA won last year in an upset. But now Utah has that home field advantage, which I think is getting stronger. I think I saw that they had a record attendance, an attendance record break last year. Team's only getting stronger, and they're going to go to the Big 12 and just dominate there. Next up is Oregon State. Now, this is a road game, and I think Oregon State's a little bit slept on. They won, was it 9 or 10 games last year? Whatever it was, they won a lot of games, and now they bring in DJ Uiagalelei, who is a benched Clemson quarterback, but he's still pretty good. I definitely think that Oregon State is probably slept on. They could probably be a top 4 team in the conference, depending on how other teams play. So I will say they could give Utah a run for their money and keep it close. This game's in Corvallis. Corvallis. I think if they don't win, they at least keep it close against Utah. Next is Cal. Cal sucks, let's be honest, and Utah should absolutely dominate in this game. Next is Southern Cal, aka USC. This is a road game. It kind of sucks that they have 3 really difficult Pac-12 road games. This is USC. the team that Utah beat twice last year, including in that Pac-12 championship game. I don't know how long they can keep that winning streak alive against this USC team, who is definitely a playoff, potentially national championship contending team. Well, I'm not gonna say it's a loss, because I think they definitely can win. I think right now, at least on paper, USC has the edge. I have to say on paper, because this is the preseason. Nothing is guaranteed in the preseason, and everything can go astray. Last year I said my Aggies were going to win 10 games. Didn't quite happen. Preseason, just talk, just pretty much speculation and guesses. So Utah definitely could win, but I think USC also could win. Yeah, it'll definitely be a big conference game in terms of those conference standings. Next up, we have Oregon. Good old Oregon with Bo Nix, who people keep saying that Bo Nix is a Heisman contender. Like, what? I don't know about that. Bo Nix could probably be a second-round draft pick, but not a Heisman contender. Oregon overall is pretty solid. I do think they could keep it close against Utah, but Utah does have that home field advantage there in Salt Lake City. Another game against a top-tier Pac-12 opponent really could go either way, honestly. Most of these games between Washington, Oregon, Utah, USC, maybe Oregon State, I think could go either way. So it's pretty much just down to how players play on the field and who's injured and who isn't at the time of these games. They should all be pretty even and all be pretty good. Next is Arizona State, coming off of a 3-9 year, completely new offense and coaches. Or not even just offense, completely new team, offense and defense, and new coaches. Through the transfer portal, they brought in a ton of guys, and recruiting, I don't think they're going to be fantastic this year. They might go to a bowl game, but I don't think they should be. This should be a very competitive game. Utah should definitely have that advantage and take home a win in that game. Next is Washington. Good old Washington. This game's being played up in Seattle. You know, you have Michael Penix Jr., who's also a Heisman contending quarterback. Aren't they all in the Pac-12? Wow. On the road against Washington, I don't think Washington's defense is that great. At least I haven't looked at that. But right now, guessing, I don't think Washington's defense is going to be at least as good as Utah's. Utah, their defense is going to be pretty good, better than their offense, I think. I don't know. This is going to be another probably flip-flop. Whoever plays best on the field, as all games. But, you know, either team really could walk home with that win on that Saturday night. 2 more games left against sort of middle of the pack 12 teams. We have Arizona on the road, who's definitely working to improve their program, but I don't think it's quite at the level of Utah yet, and the Utes should definitely win that one, at least on paper. And then we have Colorado. Now, if you're a Utah fan, I feel like I've read places and heard things. Is this a rivalry? This doesn't feel like a rivalry. If you're a Utah fan or Colorado fan that managed to find your way onto this video, is this a real rivalry? I don't think there's a trophy for it. I might be wrong. Was this sort of a rivalry week, just had to find someone to play? Or is there beef? If there is any beef, I don't think I've heard about it. Colorado, they were bad last year. Of course, they brought in Deion Sanders. You heard about that already, and how he's just gonna save the program or whatever. They're not gonna be fantastic this year, I don't think. At best, 7-5. I think. So Utah should probably just dominate that game. Now you might be saying, "Oh my gosh, that's a 9-3 projected record. That's way too low." But I'm gonna be a little bit on the under. You did see earlier the win total over under was 8.5. 8.5. I'll say 9. I'd take the over. But they scheduled that out of conference schedule against Florida and Baylor that could really bite them in the butt. I say they beat Weber and Cal, and then they win probably 4 or 5 of these games in the close win category. Could take a loss, maybe 2 losses, and then they probably take two wins. Probably split these games in the toss-up category. So 9-3 sounds about right. 3 really tough games in conference on the road. Scheduling sort of sucks all around, really. Definitely gonna have to play their best and play their hearts out to get back to that Pac-12 championship, which of course is possible. They could do really well in conference, and it just doesn't look like it because they lost an out-of-conference game or 2. Don't think they're gonna make the playoff this year. I think they could be really good. They could definitely go back to the Rose Bowl. They could. What's the next best Pac-12 bowl game? I don't even know. I should totally know that. I don't think they're going to go to the playoff. I think it would be a long shot for Cam Rising to win the Heisman. But overall, this is a really good program, but they're in a very tough conference, and they didn't make it any easier on themselves without out-of-conference schedule. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment. I love to hear comments. I love to read them. I read every single one, so leave one. I'll read it. Do you disagree with me? That's fine. You agree with me? That's cool. Even just more insight on the program if you're a diehard Ute fan. I think I was reading earlier while doing research for this video that Cam Rising might be out for the first game against Florida. That'll definitely hurt chances in that game, I think, if that's true. Just something I read. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and until the next one, peace.